if you can, first, will you talk a little bit about, since we were just talking about it, the job market right now? It has been on fire through, much of the late stages of the pandemic. And yeah, relatively speaking, it has been slowing a little bit, but that's relative. It's still pretty hot by historical standards.
What people don't realize is that it was, like you said, it was flaming hot. And in my career, never seen it like that ever. So if you had a pulse, you could get a job. And it slowed down, so it's more normal. Okay. It isn't like it's a bad market. You're never going to get a job. I think the hardest thing for people who got hit hard, especially those in tech, was it was always so easy for them to get hired. Half the time they were recruited, they did not have to do anything. And now all of a sudden, I got to write a resume, I got to look for a job, I got to start networking. Oh my, think about that.
Yeah, so it's no longer just
so
it's no longer just if you have a pulse, you get the job. Now we do have to try a little bit. And that is, of course, where your expertise is just, you're dripping in expertise on that. So let's get into that for people, who maybe, didn't have to rely that much on their resume over the past couple of years. Resumes, that's how it all begins. It may be time to redo that, especially if you haven't done it in a while.
Well, most people are not very good at resume writing. The first thing that they ignore is ATS, Applicant Tracking System. That's where your resume has to go through. It's like a big filing cabinet in Sky that the employer uses. So if you're using colored ink or headers or footers or columns and tables, that system's not going to see them. So the first thing is understanding what that program is, that system, and how to be effective getting through it. The next thing is, it's not about job descriptions. Jason, it's about results, outcomes. What were your actions and what were the results? Did you save money? Did you make money? Did you decrease or save time? Right? So there's all of those kinds of things. And numbers speak better than some or a few. Numbers are more important, especially like if you supervise, say, 20 people as opposed to supervise team. More powerful.
And you've handled a budget of X number of dollars and that sort of thing.
Correct.
So you're saying in those bullets underneath, when I tell you, where I've worked, I've worked for X employer. Now I need to get in there. And instead of saying, I had great work ethic, I was a self-starter.
That's right.
You want to see, what did you actually do, Jason? Like, what important things have you done? What results have you gotten?
Right. Biggest mistake, we copy our job description and paste it in there. No results there. Got to have results, got to be able to outline how you use those skills, because they want to see, do you have them and how will you use them with us?
Speaking of job descriptions, okay, so we see job descriptions when we're applying, okay? We've got to get through this applicant tracking system that you talk about. It's this big, bot gatekeeper, essentially. Do we need to be including some keywords in the resume itself that may have been listed in the job posting?
Yes, but not like stuff it, because people just like copy everything and stuff it. Better to have a list of, say, summarize in a couple sentences what you did and say responsibilities included. And then you have a few of those keywords. But think about it. If you're a project manager, I need to see a bullet about that. Manage numerous projects from beginning to end, right? If you're telling us that, you're good with finance, analyzed, the general ledger to determine, budget variances, whatever it might be. I think that that's kind of the mistakes people make. The other thing I find too is when you look at the job description and you see 100 requirements, they all don't matter the same. So typically the most important ones are first. Make sure you address those.
So, and distill that down a little bit. While we're on the applicant tracking system here for just a moment, if I could, I've seen some people who advocate putting a QR code on their resume. Is the applicant tracking system going to like that?
No. Yeah, people do the dumbest things. They also make these very, very beautiful looking, creative, colorful resumes that are never going to be seen because the system doesn't recognize it.
So ditch all the graphics there. You also have mentioned this, and I never thought of this before. You have a preference on what platform I should be doing this on, whether it's a Word or a PDF. Explain that a little bit.
Right. A lot of the tracking systems don't read a PDF correctly. So a Word file, and let me make a caution, a lot of younger people have a Mac, and they may not have Word, they may have something in the cloud. It needs to be a Word document. So when you save it, you must save it as Microsoft Word. That's what the systems recognize. So don't use a PDF. The only exception would be that the job application required it.
Interesting. Okay, great piece of advice there. I have to ask you about cover letters, though, now, because I always have traditionally written a cover letter. We know that for some years here in the pandemic, you didn't really have to do that. You're alive, you're hired. Talk a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what you've been hearing, because you actually plug in with people who are in hiring roles at these big companies, and they have thoughts about cover letters.
Oh, yeah. It can be very influential if it's well written. And the one thing hiring managers always tell me, I see that as your true communication skills. Because I know people can help you write the resume, but very few people will get help on the cover letter. It's not needed in every single job. The tech world doesn't look at them, doesn't care about them. You don't need to use them. But if it's a nonprofit job, an executive leadership job, something in education, there are areas where you can really point out more of your skills. Perhaps you're in marketing or you're in sales and you want to drive home some of the things you've done. Nonprofit fundraisers definitely want a cover letter because you can hit really quickly on some of your biggest accomplishments. And you can also add in some extra information, personal information. Oh, I had that experience, or I did this, or I'm really passionate about, raising funds for that charity because my family member had that illness. So those are the kinds of things. Cover letters, as I said, could be very influential. They should be written so that they are quickly scanned. So not 100 paragraphs. I have seen some come through with an education. They're 4 pages. No one's going to read 4 pages.
Wow.
So, put in what you've got to say. And if you want to hear a really bad one, the longest resume I've ever seen was 28 pages.
28?
2 pages max, folks.
2 pages max.
The older you are, the longer they get.
Okay, so wait a minute. When we talk about 2 pages max, though, now I've got to drill down on it a little bit more. Do you do front and back?
No. 2 pages, flowing document.
I know
And
most of
the
it's
biggest
digital now
culprits are
anyway.
People over 50.
Okay.
People over 50, people with executive jobs, but they don't realize the emphasis needs to be, if you're, 50 to 60, on the last 15 years, and particularly hit hard in 5 to 7, because that's where you look at and say, well, this is the most relevant. This is their latest experience. This is the latest level that they're at, right? But if you keep it lengthy, number one, nobody's going to read it. And number two, you're going to look like a dinosaur. So not a good idea.
You don't want to do that. I tend to run away from things that, on first glance, it looks like a long read. I start running because who has time anymore for that? But this does, if you do write a cover letter, doesn't it also give you the opportunity to, make yourself shine and kind of put your voice in there a little bit, but also to maybe, don't go crazy, but sprinkle in a few more of those key words from their job posting.
Correct. And the other piece of it is the extra attention to detail. You're going to go the extra mile. You're going to do a little bit more. So if I hire you for that job, you're not going to be average. I can tell right now you're going to do it in above average way. That can be powerful too. So you may think it's, unknown, but it is.
I saw in one instance that you had spoken with someone, and I thought this was real interesting. They said that they always notice if someone writes a cover letter. They also notice when they don't write the cover letter. And they said that there have been instances, put the resume over here on the side. There have been instances when they have actually reached out to someone just based on the cover letter.
That's 100% correct. I talk to HR people, recruiters all the time. I'm in all kinds of groups with them. We have conferences, we do big online sessions together, and they share very quickly what people do wrong and what's influential. And so just the things you pointed out, that if it's well written and you point out the things we need, pick up the phone and call you. Or nowadays, we send you an email or we send you a message on LinkedIn.
They have also told you that they don't want to see a cover letter that clearly was sent to 100 different people. It looks like a form letter.
Yeah, no form letter, nothing generic. And don't start out with, oh, I saw your ad on Indeed and I'd like to apply for it. Open with a powerful sentence that says, I have 6 years of experience, blah, 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 so that you capture my attention very quickly. Because as you said, it's only glanced at. It is not read word for word. Neither is the resume. No resume is read word for word either.
They really don't spend much time, hiring managers, do they, on your resume? You put so much work into this thing, and it might get what, seconds?
Yeah, the initial glance is usually 15 to 20 seconds. And if you don't capture their attention with something they want to see, one of the things that I always include is what I call a summary of qualifications. It's very close to the top, and it's 4 to 6 sentences of what you bring to the job. So it summarizes your skills and experience, pointing out the most important things to doing that role. If they read that, they slow down and they keep going. That's probably the biggest thing I get feedback on, is that most people don't write one, or if they do, they write it in first person, like, I'm a very versatile and reliable worker. Nobody cares. What we care about is how much experience. I've got 8 years leading large projects, right? That's the kind of thing that they want to see.
So write that summary near the top there and put in those specifics and those results and keep it succinct. Let's talk a little bit about, because you touched on older workers here, and I really want to get into that too, because, during the pandemic, it seems like a lot of people who may have been, dealing with, we all know it happens, age discrimination out there in the workplace. They may have dealt with that, but during the pandemic, suddenly people want me again because they need people right now. Well, we might see the pendulum swing back a little now. Talk a little bit about what an older worker needs to do, because you've seen this, Robin, where you look at a resume and you go, oh my gosh, this thing is just screaming, I'm old and out of date.
So I just want to address the marketplace. In 2020 and 2021, a lot of employers offered retirement packages. They were good ones, they had money, and the unwritten message was, if you don't take this, you're probably going to get let go anyway. So a bunch of people saw themselves flooded into the marketplace. The next thing that's been happening is, since November, I'm starting to see more people losing their jobs. Older, more senior people, obviously tech people, but in sales and HR, those areas got hit too. And a lot of the HR people are older. A lot of managers are older, so they're over 50. I'm hearing people between 50 and actually 64 that are still looking for a new role. Age discrimination, unfortunately, exists. So number one, chop your work history down on your resume. 15 years, don't go back farther than that. Drop your college degree if it was before 2005. So you don't want anything that shows that more than 20 years. Be careful about technology. Technology is not what you used to have. So we don't use things that are outdated. For example, we don't want to see Hotmail or AOL emails. We want to see Gmail. We want to know that you know how to use Slack, or you know how to use Excel, and that you emphasize also, how have you stayed current? What classes have you taken? What conferences do you go? Do you follow thought leaders? Those things are really important. And the last thing, if you're a manager, you've got to show that you're coachable as a manager and that you build a collaborative team. The world operates in collaborative teams. The days of it's my way or the highway is long gone.
That's interesting. And so then you're showing that you are still malleable, you're still adaptable, you're still able to work with all age groups.
That's correct.
That's brilliant.
And remember too, you have to be open to ideas from young people. our innovation comes from people under 30. And that is why it's important to build that collaborative team and call on each person and listen to ideas and have them build from each other. Because during COVID, one of the things we were losing is some of that innovation when people were talking on Zoom and they weren't, talking at the water cooler and sharing some ideas, or being able to say, hey, I can't figure this out in the computer. Can you help me? As opposed to having to wait 8 hours for somebody to send you a solution.
I want to close here by talking to people on the other end of the age spectrum, and those are the people who are new to the workforce. Some of them, all they've ever known is this incredibly hot market where you get a job like that, you get multiple offers, you can jump jobs easily. It hasn't always been that way.
No. And the new college grads this year are like, how come I'm not hired 5 months before I graduated? Because they aren't doing that right now.
Yeah, it's an
And you have to
expectation.
know what you want. You can't just be like, well, I'd like a job, I don't, maybe in marketing, maybe in communications, maybe. You have to be specific. You need a job title. I also think too that the Gen Z and some of the millennials that are under 30, they haven't seen a tough market. Now, some of them did in 2020 because a lot of them, lost their job then. But they looked at it differently because it was a mass layoff across the country, and they were getting unemployment, and they were getting extra money. So it's shocking to them if they get laid off now, and they're not prepared. They don't have an updated resume. They haven't understood the importance of networking and building a good network of contacts. Use LinkedIn to become friends, quote unquote, with anybody in your field. So look for managers or recruiters that might hire nurses and link with them. That's the first thing. The second thing too is LinkedIn is really important, and pretty much a lot of people just ignore it. You can't do that. This is how they find you, and be active. You'll see in your feed some employers putting in a job description that looks like something you could do and want to do. So the other thing I think that happens is when they're a new college grad or the first year's out, they are not clear where they want to go. So here's my advice. Look for a place with a good manager and is going to give you some good training, that you're going to be able to grow and improve your skills because you're really raw. And if you want your career to move fast, take some certifications. Maybe it's in project management, maybe it's in e-commerce, maybe it's in design, but these will add to the education you have. Coursera, that is an online program, offers all kinds of programs and courses and certificates, very reasonably priced, from the top university professors in the country. I highly recommend that as a source if you need new skills.
And employers want to see that, especially if you're brand new, that you don't have a ton of experience, but boy, you sure have racked up some varied skills here in what you've learned.
Right. Think about this. Most of them don't have internships. And if they did, they didn't have a lot in it. But if you were able to take some extra coursework that's relevant to where you want to go, that is impressive to an employer, and enough for them to say, oh, well, maybe we should talk to this person.
I'm going to, as part of this, link to our conversation before about LinkedIn, because I think you had some really great info on there about, the proper picture, how to fill out how to fill out your profile. But I do want to ask you, because you've made it a real point to tell people, turn on the open to work notch there on LinkedIn so that people know that you're looking.
I don't do that with higher level professionals, but people that are, especially people under 30, even under 35, it doesn't hurt. And if a recruiter sees you, they'll know, okay, this is a person who's actively looking. On LinkedIn, I made an e-guide. It's off my website. It's free. It takes you from the beginning to the end, every single section. Don't ignore LinkedIn. People have a skeleton. They put in maybe a job title, the employer. You're missing ways to get in important things you accomplished in keywords so a recruiter or a hiring manager could find you. And they scour LinkedIn looking for talent. So it's important to be there.
I have a couple of more questions about younger workers, but real quickly while we're on this, if I'm an older worker and, I've chopped down my resume to only show the most recent 15 years, do I do the same thing on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Okay.
And we only want to see things relevant to what you're doing now. So if you're a CFO, we could care less that you were accountant 20 years ago. It has no relevance.
And that you waited tables in college. Yeah. So
Yeah, no, we don't need that too.
back to the younger set here, though, you lay out what is sort of the ideal size of your network that you should have there on LinkedIn, how many people you should be connected to, and you say that a lot of younger people are falling way short.
Yeah. What I do is I follow their lead, and they say the best network has 300 to 500 connections. It is not uncommon for me to see new grads come out or people with, 26 or younger with 30, maybe 50. Some have 0, some have 3. This isn't going to help you. It's an algorithm and it needs to be active. You need to have a big enough network so that algorithm will find you. Fancy talk for it's how it works. And so it goes through. If you're more active, you move up on the algorithm so more people can find you. If you're inactive, they don't see you at all.
Mm. Another website that you have really talked a lot about here, and because I think a lot of younger people too, like anyone, they don't really know where to go to look for jobs. It seems like there's so many different sites. You've mentioned Glassdoor specifically. Talk a little bit about why that is.
Glassdoor focused on jobs for people with about 5 years or less experience. It knew when it was creating the site that, Indeed and LinkedIn had captured the higher level market. So I always recommend that you do 3 things. Look at Glassdoor, look at Indeed, right? Look at LinkedIn, and then make a list of companies you're interested in and go directly to their websites. Large companies are going to have, hundreds of more jobs on their own website than you're ever going to see on any of those search engines. So don't miss those opportunities. If they're not there and you don't know about them, you can't apply. So that's why it's really important to have companies' websites as a part of your search plan.
I wanted to ask you with regard to LinkedIn and with a resume, is there a time frame as to how often I should be going in and just, maintaining, updating my resume and LinkedIn, even when I have a job, I'm gainfully employed, I'm, somewhat happy, et cetera. Should I be going back from time to time, and what is that time period, and kind of sprucing those up?
Once a year. And a couple months after you get a new job, you can at least on LinkedIn put down where you've been hired and, a broad sentence about what you're working on there. That would be the biggest thing. The mistake that I see yesterday, I worked with a gentleman, he's a high-level executive. 12 years ago, he updated his resume. He had nothing and he lost his job. He knew it was coming. He waited until it happened. And I think that's the other big mistake. There's usually warnings. Many times you've been told your job's in danger. Why do you wait till you're let go? There's no reason to wait till you're actually laid off. Take that, whether it's 4 weeks or 2 months, start actively looking. Make sure that resume is great. Start looking at the right jobs. Do not apply to everything. Young people make that mistake. They'll say, I applied to 80 jobs and no one responded. Resume's a problem. There's the first thing, right? And you're not being discreet enough. You're not looking for something you're really qualified for. Many times they want more experience than you have, or you're all over the board. You're applying for 15 different types of job titles, and and the resume doesn't have any relevance to most of them.
It's okay to stretch a little bit, isn't it, though? I mean, if you don't match
Oh,
all of the
yeah.
requirements.
About 80%, if you've got 80%. And one of the mistakes I think that people coming out of college make is they say, well, I don't have any experience, but that isn't necessarily true, because if you had an internship, then that's experience. So a lot of times looking at that, you might be able to say, well, this person was a research assistant at their university, and there's a year or 2 years of experience. So right in that summary, I would put new college, marketing graduate with 2 2 years of professional experience, because that puts you in a little higher category. And employers do like to see internships. They're really important. If you're in college, absolutely make the effort to get some.
When you talk about people who wait until the last minute to try to look for a job, usually, again, you at least get some warning sometimes that something's coming for you specifically, but you can also read, the writing on the wall at a place that seems to be struggling and having some trouble. And you can see that, maybe we're going to have some job losses here. Get moving on that as fast as you can, because wouldn't you agree, Robin, that it is much easier to land a job when you still have a job?
I agree from this reason. You get depressed, you get discouraged, you get desperate. And that is all apparent in the search process. The other thing, too, is if you're in a company and they're laying some people off, do not believe anybody that says, oh, you're fine. Oh, your job will be okay, especially if it's your boss. Because if you go, boss is probably going with you. So if something like that is happening, update the resume, look for something, cherry pick, make sure it's something you really, really want, and pay attention. Employers are still paying high salaries. So there are still a lot of carrots and good reasons to move, and not necessarily just because you're in a panic, but because the salary will be significantly more than what you're making now, especially if you've been in the same company for a long time.
Robin, I really appreciate what you do and how you do it, and it seems like I'm constantly stalking everything that you write. I mean, it's just it's smart stuff, and it's stuff that I think a lot of us are just not very good at. So thanks for putting it all out there and for taking the time with us here.
You're welcome. I care very much. My whole career has been to help people find jobs and get a career that they enjoy and they find satisfying. That's the most important thing, is to really love what you do.